Hi there, boys and girls. It's your fearless leader, Johnny, here again. And it's Friday. It's Feedback Friday. Let's call it that. I've gotten some of your homework. A couple people still owe me, but I think I have a number of them in now. So I thought I would go over your resume, online resume pages, and give you some quick feedback. I'm probably not going to go into super detail, but I'll give you, as much good uh, opinion as I can about how your page looks and about how your coding looks. So let's get going. I'm here right now on the LogJam website, and remember, I have several uh, posts up there. I just put a new one up there earlier today. A bunch of new information having to do with grading options and computers that you can use from school, and of course withdrawals information and information about the online elements of the course as they're going along. We also have columns and navigation assignment, which maybe I'll talk about a little bit at the end of this video. Pretty simple assignment, and that, as usual, is due on Monday, so start working on that. We also have two main videos that I put up earlier this week. We have the modified April 1st video and the first online video, which is misidentified as March 20th. My brain was in another universe when I was writing out that headline. So this was actually March 30th, not March 20th. So these two videos, hopefully most of you have looked at them, but go through them. I think they're, pretty good. Talking about putting together our Founding Fathers website. And also inside each of these are some questions towards the end that I would like you guys to answer. Just pretty simple true-false questions having to do with stuff that's inside the videos. So a lot of you have sent me your answers, but some of you have not. So be sure to go through to the end of these videos and then look for the questions that are embedded inside the videos, and then send me the answers to those questions. There's only 5 of them in each video. And like I say, they're just pretty simple true-false. Just send me an email to john@prairiestudio.com with the answers to the 5 questions. And there are other posts here from earlier. Also, the Adobe Applications video that Eric created. Hopefully, if you guys don't have access to some of the Creative Suite applications, you can get them. Just look at the video that Eric has created, and it goes step by step, showing you how you can access Dreamweaver and Photoshop and anything else that you want inside the entire Creative Suite, all for free, all from your own cozy little home. So that is the situation. Let me go down to the assignment that I'd like to talk about today. Style the online resume page. Use this HTML page to practice your CSS style knowledge. You can add HTML containers if you want, add as many CSS styles, make the page look interesting. So click here to download, and that's in a Word document format. And if I double click on that, I will open that up. And then what I wanted you to do is to copy all of the HTML information And then copy, and then go to Dreamweaver, which I have open here, and paste that into a new HTML document. So I'm going to go File, New, and then just accept the defaults. It defaults to a new HTML document. Click on the Create button, and it jumps to the live view. We want to go to Code View, and because we have all the code included in that Word document, we can just select everything here from the skeletal HTML that Dreamweaver creates for us, and we can just paste. So this is the unadorned online resume page with the doc type, HTML, the head with the meta char set. This is already set up for responsive design, which we don't really talk about too much in this course. I'm going to wait maybe the last week or two. I'll talk a little bit about responsive design, but this line 5 is crucial for your pages if you want to have them respond using the responsive web design techniques. Then we have the title, and of course, after the head closes, the body of the HTML opens. And we have an introductory area here with a little comment. H1, Christiana. H2, web developer plus educator. Then a paragraph explaining her basic background. Then the header closes, and then the main element opens up. And remember, the main is just there to be used as a container element for the most important parts of your page. And again, that's up to you to decide. But here, the way that I had this originally set up, the main goes from right before work experience and goes all the way down, 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 down to the end of the school details section. So basically everything besides the header and the footer is part of the main. Right after the main, you can see here that we have the footer. Inside the footer, we have a little bit of extra information. It's not exactly a fat footer. There's not a ton of information here, but there's a little bit. So we're using an H2 here, which you don't normally see in a regular footer, but if you're adding more information, then it's a good idea to use, a heading. And then we have a div that encloses an email link and also a link to the website and social media to Twitter, LinkedIn, and Facebook. And all that is included inside the one div tab. And normally I like to organize this so that it's a little easier to read by putting everything vertically. I noticed that some of you in your code kind of strung things out in a horizontal fashion with your CSS and some of your HTML, and it's okay, but it really makes it so much harder to read. So just look at this div tag now compared to what it was just a second ago. It's so much easier to read and to understand, right? We've got the contact information. We know where the div begins and ends. We can see a duplication vertically, like a list of the A tags with the href. And again, it's easy for us to visualize what this is, what this means. It's just a number of links for contact information. And that div ends, second paragraph that would normally be just the normal skinny footer content. If we didn't have the social media, it'd probably just have the paragraph without the heading or the div tags and links. Then, of course, that paragraph ends, the footer ends, the body of the page ends, and, of course, we have to have the ending HTML right at the end. So inside here, we have sections based on education. So there are the literal section element with the class of education. It makes sense because Christina's talking about her education here using an H2, Seneca College in Toronto, a terrific little college. Webmaster content here for Webmaster Site Content Certificate. She's jumping down from H2 to H3 to H4, which is the proper way to do it. Remember, you don't want to jump from an H2 to right to an H4. You want to go in order when you're going down the line, creating headings. And after the H4, we've got paragraph. Then another H3, because now she's talking about another university, another higher education institution. Started with Seneca, H3, and then jumping to York University in Toronto. Again, that's an H3 because they're both on the same level. The H4s correspond to each other because here we're talking about the different certificates or degrees that she received from that particular school that's noted on the higher H level. And again, a paragraph that just very quickly describes, what the gist of the certificate or degree was all about. And then again, San Jose State and General Studies and first year General Studies as the paragraph. So you can see that this is very consistent. If we wanted to, we could break this up a little bit. It'd be easier to visualize. So you can see that there are H3, H4 paragraph, H3, H4 paragraph, H3, H4 paragraph, and then in between the opening and closing section tags. So this is a very good way to do things. So take a note of how this was done, and try to incorporate that in your thinking when you're doing your own HTML. If you wanted to go even further and break the page up even more, you could break each one of these parts of the education into subsections. I don't know, because there's not a whole lot of discussion of exactly what the degree or the certificate really was about. Probably unnecessary to do that. But if you had more content here in the paragraphs, let's say that you had, maybe 200 or 300 words, and maybe even had a little image of the college, which would actually be a pretty cool thing to do if you had at least a little thumbnail image of the college. You could put these into separate containers. You could put them into divs, or you could put them into sections inside of this main education section. You could have a section called Seneca, a section called York, and a section called San Jose. So that would be a way to break the page down even more and make even more finely grained sense from the semantic point of view of the content. So, and you can do that easily if you decided to do something like that. You could select a particular run of content and then insert by going up to Dreamweaver's insert menu. And if we wanted to insert a section, which is one of my favorite elements for doing that, you could give this a class of Seneca by typing in the class name here and then just clicking OK. Bingo. Dreamweaver does the work for you. Pretty cool. So now we have a separate section with Seneca, and we could do the same thing with York and San Jose. So like I say, for this amount of content here, probably unnecessary to make a bigger deal about the HTML. But it depends on what kind of a resume you're doing. A lot of times less is more when it comes to trying to communicate this type of information. A lot of times a prospective employer doesn't really necessarily want to know every little thing about you. They just want to get a quick sense of the highlights of your employment and your education. So if they decide that they're interested in hiring you, then they will probably ask you to explain in further detail what you did at Seneca, what you did at York, and what you did at San Jose. But that would probably be at a later point. Okay, so that's the basic idea, and that's just repeated in the work section and the introductory section here. So it's pretty straightforward, a pretty decent way of including information. So again, this would be a nice thing for you to archive this HTML, and again use as kind of a template for just how you would handle larger amounts of printed information. So if we look at this live, you can see that it doesn't look very interesting. It's got the default formatting based upon just the HTML and the default browser styles, but otherwise it's pretty uninteresting looking. So let's take a look at what you guys have done with this. We have, like I say, a few here. We've got Chang Young, and you could take a look out in the browser to give it a little bit better view. I'll go to Google Chrome. Save changes, and look in Google Chrome, and here is Chang Young's page, and it looks kind of nice. Kind of a minimalist approach. Didn't overdo it, which a lot of times is might be the best way to do it. If you're doing a resume, you don't necessarily want to be too extravagant, although I encouraged you to do whatever you wanted to. But this would be a very nice real-world approach in terms of the design. Got a nice large black heading with the name that really makes the name stand out, which is good. You can see that he's got his subheadings set to center, which I think gives it a nice look. And he's got borders as little breaks separating the different parts of the information. And it's done some interesting stuff with the text. It's got a capital letter for the beginning of each, looks like each sentence. And it is using different font techniques, including small heads, and it's got different font styles here, and an interesting use of negative space. Things are spread out a little more. If we squeeze the page down to the point where a lot of times people would actually be looking at it, it doesn't seem quite as expansive, but that's kind of interesting. That looks kind of nice. I think extra space here, extra negative space. Oftentimes, if I was doing, a regular HTML page, I might consider that negative space between subheadings to be a little excessive. But it seems to make sense here. kind of like the way that that looks. And it's consistent. That's the big thing. Oftentimes, when you make a decision about how to design something, it starts to make sense if you follow through with your design decisions and try to make them run consistently down the page. And you can see here that Cheng has done a good job of being consistent with the separators, with the size and the font of the subheadings, and with the negative space that's being introduced, as well as some of the different styles that he's using in the paragraphs and list items. So that looks pretty nice. And down at the bottom, you just got simple, straightforward horizontal list of links. And then this down here, I don't think he really wanted to include that, but it's okay. So it looks pretty decent. Let's look at the code, because the code is also important. Now, there are a couple times where I went and tried to regularize the formatting of the code on some of these. And if you find yourself writing code and then looking at your page and seeing that you've got all kinds of odd spacings and you've created rules that are indented way over to the right and others way over to the left and whatnot, you can regularize the look of your code view by going to the edit menu and going down to code and then choosing apply source formatting. And I may have done that here with this. When you do that, it will kind of regularize, for example, the style that you use for your CSS. And notice that some people are using a real sort of abbreviated horizontal kind of a look. And it's really, it's not that it's wrong. It's just that, wow, it's just so hard to read and to understand. So I would suggest that you do not do things like this, where you put everything, on the same line on the same page. That just, that's just so hard to figure out because you've got the rules, the colons, the subcolons, everything running together. And even with the color coding, which makes it 100 times easier to understand, it's still confusing. Imagine if someone had to read this on a computer that just had, regular HTML editor without any color coding. If this entire code was all, white on black, it would be really, really hard to understand. So I would suggest to, again, it's not necessary, but I would really strongly suggest that you write your code so that the selector and the first curly bracket is on the first line. And then each of the rules are on a separate line so that you have background color, and then you have color, and then you have margin, and then you have padding, and you have font, which is incorrect, and font size, and line height. Oh, okay, no, that is right. We're using shorthand. Okay. Didn't notice that. So, yeah. So that is, I think, much easier to read. And then the ending curly bracket on a line of its own. And I usually give one line of blank space in between the ending curly bracket and the beginning of another rule. And I also usually give an extra space between the value and the property, because it makes it a little bit easier to read. So, it doesn't make any difference to the browser. The browser can read this, so non-human devices don't care, but we humans sometimes have a hard time reading people's code with our own eyes, and if you do it like this, it's just so much easier to see. So here we can see, got a nice background color, the color of the text is the color. Now remember, if you have all the same letters in an alphabet, hexadecimal, you can actually leave off the last three. This is called hexadecimal shorthand. Ends up still being the same. Still get the same color. Margin and padding is a good idea. This is font shorthand, which I don't usually use, but then that's fine. Font size 20 pixels, making the size of the base font a little bit bigger. Line height of 145 is good. Each one, you don't need to put font weight bold because that's the default. So remember, if you can avoid putting a rule there that doesn't make any difference, it helps because every time you write a rule, it adds to the file weight of your page. So every character, the F there, and the O, and the N, and the T, each one of those actually adds a little bit of file weight to the file. So if you can get rid of something, then please do. But otherwise, it's good. Text align center, a little bit of padding is always a good idea. H2, again, you don't need bold because it's bold by default. The paragraph inside the header, giving it a font style italic. And here it's using a descendant selector, which is good. Selecting only the paragraphs inside the header. The nav li display in line gives us the horizontal nav. It's good. Using some margin on the right or the left, spreads the A tags out. Hold on 1 second while I answer my phone. All right, we're back. So I was saying that the nav area here for the A tags is good to include some margin in order to spread the A tags out. Get rid of the underline by using text decoration none, block quote. It's good. First line and first letter. It's interesting. Remember, we use the double colon there. P double colon first dash line means that we're going to select the first line of each paragraph, and in this case, set that to small caps. And then you can also do that for the first letter of the paragraph and set that to a larger size so that you have like almost like a drop cap sort of a look, except it's not quite drop. And also first of type on the footer, a slightly advanced way of selecting just the first paragraph in the footer. If you have an element that has more than one of a certain type inside of it, and you just want to pick the first one, then you can use P colon first of type. And again, that's a cool way of selecting just the first paragraph inside the footer. Container element, width of 80%, gives you that accordion box kind of a look. Margin auto centers things in the center. Got a couple different special classes, box 1 and box 2. Basically, pretty much just got a different border top here and a slightly different set of padding and margin for the two different types of boxes. And the boxes come in the div here inside of the container class is one box 2 and another box 2 inside the work experience and another box 2 inside the job details. So those are repeated over and over again, another box 2, which is a good idea because that's the whole idea behind using classes, that you can use them over and over again. So used box 2 several times. Not sure where box 1 comes in. I really only see box 2 here. Oh, box 1 is right up at the top. So that's just for the heading that gives that big dark background with rounded edges. Yeah. All right, so very nice. Well done. And like I say, it looks pretty nice. And excellent. All right, let's take a look at, this is Andy Weber's, and much more colorful. Let's take a look at the file out in Google. So yeah, the color, very eye-catching, and the a lot of little geometric shapes and gradients, and yet still has enough contrast because he's using a very dark text color for the heads, subheads, and the initial paragraph. So it's kind of nice. And then this kind of dark green as the main background for the page, and then kind of a light, sort of a greenish beige for the what would be the kind of the wrapper element where the main text is going to be seen. So again, that's nice because it gives again a lot of contrast, and this little bit of kind of yellowish green goes nicely with the dark pea green on the sides. And you wouldn't normally think that the greens would go with this kind of pink, but I think they kind of do. It's kind of a pleasing sort of a look. And I like the fact that up here the the different seams inside here kind of meet towards the center, which gives the top area again a nice sort of dynamic look. And again, in terms of setting up the content, it's all very logically arranged, at least visually. And that's really what you want to accomplish on a resume. You want to be sure that people can look at it, read it quickly, understand it. And the use of the headings, subheadings, and paragraphs really makes it easy to understand, and especially too with the list here, and then education down here as well, and then a secondary area that's broken apart. Let's keep in touch. Copyright 2019. Somehow I think the links down here kind of got lost in the shuffle. Might have been a problem. On a couple of these pages, you guys sent me things that I had to open up in different rare containers or zip files, and I wasn't sure whether my Mac handled it properly, so I lost track a couple times of where things were, and I had to rearrange things. So some of it might have been my fault. Things don't show up properly. But let's look at the code real quick here. So we have the head of the document. Again, this is where you string things out horizontally, and like I say, It's okay to do, but it would just be so much nicer, to do that. The HTML, the head, then inside there, the meta tag. If we go to the edit menu and code, let's see if the source formatting will help us here. Apply source formatting, and you can see that I think that probably does straighten things out and makes things look a little bit nicer. So take advantage of that. Use edit, code, apply source formatting, and I think your code page will look a little bit nicer. So in the style, we have body dark olive green, Helvetica and sans serif for the font family. Header, it's using that nice pink image. Background color beige, a little bit of padding. The headings are centered. The main is set to percentage, so that's interesting. Margin left and right. Of course, we could do this in one rule. You could just go margin, excuse me, margin 0 auto, and just make that one rule. Okay. And a little bit of padding, background color beige. The footer, text align center, background color beige, a little bit of padding and margin. And then these icons, I don't know whether they really worked out. Is that what shows up at the bottom of the page? I don't know. Those are all the icons down there. I think this is one image, and I think these are the icons, but they just didn't come in. And that might have been partly due to the fact that I didn't, get the file to open up properly. You can see down here, the href is set to file : / Whenever you see that, it usually means that there is some problem with the links involved. Sometimes you can solve that by saving the file, but I saved it once, and if I save this again, it doesn't solve the problem. So again, that might have been just my fault, but I'm not exactly sure. Let's see, if we cut all that out there, let's see if that works. Still don't think that that's going to solve it. It really is just the link anyway. It's not the actual icons. So I have a feeling that it's the I class here. Fab, FA, Twitter -square, FA -3x. Somehow that's just not working. I don't know if it's a problem with this, by the way, is what Andrew's using is the Font Awesome library of font images. It's a font family that is got like about 8,000 different little font images in it that you can use. You can access it by creating a link, but I don't know whether the link was created properly up here. I think this was the. I'm not sure. I think you've got to set up a link to. Well, all CSS is here. It's the Font Awesome, but just not sure whether you set that up quite correctly. But Font Awesome is pretty nice, and if we have time towards the end of the course, I will go through and show you how you can use that to your advantage. But those icon-y things didn't quite work, I think. But they probably would look cool if we had them set up properly. All right, so otherwise, the standard HTML that we've already gone through doesn't look like anything's been changed too much. So pretty nice looking page, and aside from some of the problems which might have been my fault on the bottom, pretty nice. Right, let's look at Luke's. Luke, take a look at the live view, and yeah, this is again kind of minimalist, but very serviceable. Right click and show this in the Google, and you can see how that looks. It's got so it squeezes down a little bit, so it actually looks pretty good. And without images or anything, it's easy to actually create a pretty responsive web page. It's only when you have columns and a lot of complicated subcolumns and imagery that things become difficult to figure out. But this looks pretty nice. The only thing I would say, again, you're being consistent, and like I said earlier, consistency makes your style choices, seem better and more appropriate and interesting. But I would say that the blue here, coming right at the edge of the text, it's a style, and if you like that look, then it's okay. But and the same with your boxes here. I would say the only thing I would change really would be to open these up by adding some padding to these. I think that the visibility and the look of the page would improve. Again, just my opinion, because it's a style decision that you make, so like I say, it's kind of up to you, but you've got each one in H2. It looks like maybe you tried to add some padding, but made a little mistake here. Again, I don't know if it was me making this mistake or you, but you had a margin here and you don't have anything, and it didn't include a semicolon. So if we put something like that, 0, you can see the difference in the color. You can tell right away that there's something wrong here, because padding stands out being this kind of a gold color instead of the kind of purple color it should be. That's because you've got the beginning of a rule but no end to it. You've got to have, even if you didn't put anything there, if you put a semicolon, if you put a semicolon there, then it's okay. But I would probably put a 0 there just to say something substantive about it. And when we do that, you can see that little bit of padding is added. It's not too much, but I think there's a little bit more than there was before. So I would go a little bit further. I would go maybe about 8. Maybe that's excessive. At least 5. Half an M. Yeah, that looks pretty good. I think that looks better. And then down here, these would be the these elements are the H3s. So I might do the same thing for the H3s. I might have, you have margin here, but the padding, remember, is the negative space on the inside. Maybe not quite as much, maybe 0.4 m, because these are smaller than the top headings. So you can see that it gives them a little bit of breathing space. And just those two little changes, I think, make that look better. The other thing that I might change is I think that the borders, it's a nice idea, but I think they're a little heavy. So the borders on the H3s, I would probably tone those down a little bit. You've got a border of 5 pixels. I think lighter is better myself. Again, it's just a style decision, but I might go with just 1 pixel. It seems to me that's a little more elegant looking. You may disagree, but because these are real heavy, this blue gives the page heaviness, and I think that when you have a lighter border around these, that it's like a nice counterpoint to the heaviness of the solid backgrounds of the main headings. So, and then down here, I might just give a little bit of margin here, because you've got your links here going right into the let's keep in touch area. So down there, let's see, that would be the H2 in the footer. I don't know if you've got a special rule for that. Remember, we could make a special rule. You've got H2 rules here. And you probably don't want to change that, but we could make a rule just for the footer. We could go footer H2 and maybe just go, margin bottom, 1 m or something like that. And so it would be not all the H2s, but just the H2 in the footer. Give some extra push at the bottom of the H2 to push away anything that's right below it. So you can see here now, you've got your links a little bit down below. So, and the links themselves, I don't know, I think everything in the footer might look a little nicer being centered. Again, that's just my prejudice. You've got footer there. Yeah, I might just make a rule just to see how it looks. Again, this is just my thing, but if I have a simple footer, it just strikes me that oftentimes centering text in a footer fits real simple. If it's a fat footer, that's a completely different thing. But that, I think that makes it look a little bit nicer maybe. Because you have the main headings centered, so that keeps things kind of on a more even keel. If we save that and look at it in the browser. Yeah. So just a couple little changes. Otherwise, your code looks pretty nice on the page. Again, it's simple, but I think it's effective. And resumes, oftentimes you want to be simple. All right, good. So here we have, this is, Chris's. Right, so Chris, it's got a nice little image here, a little screenshot of a young lady. I don't know if that's Christina, but looks interesting. And if we look at this in the browser, yeah. So again, this is very functional and reminiscent of a printed resume. But I like the image here that gives it a little bit more personality, and the fact that you've got nice wraparound on the image on the top left. And then breaking this apart so that you can obviously see that there's two main parts: work experience and education. Because those are the only two headings that are centered. Everything else is, left aligned, and they've got far right aligned here. I don't know whether that works if someone's looking at the page spread out like that, maxing out. I don't know whether that works so good, Chris. When it's squeezed in, probably looks better, but even squeezed in, I think it's easy to get this kind of lost, the dates here. So I would probably, I know you're probably just trying to, think it's something, to make it look a little different, stand out or something, but I think I would probably move these, in. There might be some way you could put them somewhere. You could put them underneath or on top and maybe put them in parentheses or something, or use a different font style in order to, make them look a little cooler. But I'm not sure it really works setting them all the way to the right like that. But that's a small thing. But my eye loses track of them. You know what I mean? They seem like they're a little cut off, especially if the page gets longer like this, and it seems like I'm not sure what they're doing out there. But otherwise, you've got the different style, oblique or italic style for the main subheadings. So give people, a little bit more of a visual cue about how to interpret the different parts of the bold headings. And kind of reverse yourself here, though. You've got the, Roman on top, and then the subheadings underneath that in italic. So I don't know. Again, a lot of it is consistency. So if I were doing italic for the slightly more important headings on top, I'd probably do that down here in education as well. It's not a big deal, but just notice that you kind of reversed your idea of where to put the italic. But, nice spacing. I like the way that these are spaced out, giving them enough negative space, letting each element breathe. And then down here, you've got simple links for social icons. I'd probably give it a little extra space down here for the copyright information. And again, I might put this stuff all centered, although, it's not necessary. The only thing is, boy, this is really small. I don't know if you intentionally wanted everything on a page to be this small, but, someone who does not have the greatest eyesight, may have a little trouble. Of course, we can always increase the size of the browser, but it seems like you may have overdid it a little bit with the size. I don't know if that's something that I might have done unintentionally when I downloaded it. Let's see what the rules are like. Wrapper max width, border style double, image, float left on image, main, aside, footer, header, family. Yeah, we've got 13 pixels for an H2 header. Boy, 11 pixels for text. Now, maybe you were thinking that pixel was based on a point. You know, if you're coming from, you know, print design or just thinking about, you know, what you do with your Word documents. But pixels are a little bit different. Remember, the base default size for body text is 16 pixels. So when you make the paragraphs 11 pixels, wow, that is, you know, a huge reduction in size. So, I mean, you know, if there's some reason to do that, maybe you think, no, if someone wants to print this, they can print it all on one page or something like that. I suppose there's some rationale, but personally, I would stick with the standard sizes and see how that looks. But here you got a number of different, you've got work, and where you're clearing, and work first of type, where you're moving the type up using position relative. That's kind of interesting. It's a tricky way of fine-tuning the position of something. When you set something to position relative, you can then use top, bottom, left, or right, and you can kind of inch it up a little bit to the left, right, top, bottom. If you just have a little element that's recalcitrant and you just can't figure out how else to do it. I don't know whether you want to go too far with that. You know, using position relative all over the place sometimes is an indication that you're just sort of giving up, trying to figure out how to you know, set things up in a more normal way. So, you know, it's an interesting way of doing things, but it's not something that you want to do on a regular basis. It's only for those really absolutely, totally confounding little points on your page that you've tried to get right and just ready to, you know, give up the ghost on it. So this would be like a last resort sort of an approach, I think. So 15 pixels is a little bit much to be moving anyway, but 65 is really huge. So I'm not sure. This is the third paragraph inside work. And I'm not sure where you have work here. I presume it's in the work experience area. Oh, we got a classify. Oh, it's already built in. There's no first, second. Let's see. Got first, second, third. So, not quite sure I could figure it out, but I'm not quite sure what the third child paragraph of work is. But anyway, I would suggest just using regular margins. You know, if things are too far apart, then what you want to do is just set the margins at the top or the bottom to be less. You know, part of the reason why things might be too close together or too far apart, usually too far apart is the problem, is because of the default margins that are added to your page by the browser. So if you go, you know, and I show this a couple times in the videos on Founding Fathers, if I have a situation where one element is below another and is a little too far away, instead of going position relative and moving it up, which I think I did do once just to show you how it was done, the more natural approach is to simply reduce the top margin of the bottom element and the bottom margin of the top element. And when you do that, then you're usually in pretty good shape. And you don't have to use position relative. Position relative can lead to some of the problems if you're creating responsive web pages, which, if you want to go further in your design work, is something that you're going to have to do. And so this kind of an approach is a little less, it limits what you can do. But it's a cool last resort strategy. It's something you should always be aware of that you can use. But I think you're using it, and here you're using a little bit too much. But you're zeroing in and trying to get everything to fine tuned, and you're setting up some interesting, more advanced first of type. And nth of type. Let's see here. Yeah, nth child here. So that's good. You're reading ahead and you're reading the book and experimenting with more details. So it's always a good thing. List items. Yeah, I would get out of the habit of doing that. You don't want to have position relative all over your pages. And everyone seems to be latched on to Font Awesome. Boy, everyone's trying to use Font Awesome here. Not sure that it's really working because you gotta, like I say, I'll take it hooked into Cloudflare Font Awesome. Let's see, are your things coming through though? Oh, maybe they are. Oh yeah, I can see. They're so small, I can have a hard time seeing them. But I guess like I can see the little Twitter bird there. Yeah. So I guess your Font Awesome's coming through. So maybe people can take your page as an example. But again, they're so small; it's really hard to see. And to make them bigger, you just you don't make the image bigger because it's not an image, right? You know that, but other people, you make the font size bigger down in the area where you're using them, and that makes them bigger. So, but otherwise, this is good. Very, like I say, very serviceable. Just a few things that I would change, but otherwise, a nice effort. Okay, let's look at Nico. Nico, how you doing? And let's take a look live here. Ooh, boy, look at that. Nico's got all kinds of imagery here that looks really cool. I like this silhouette kind of a look. That's kind of neat. Really, really very cool. So I love this image down below here. Very, and then this is really cool with the teacher working, teaching, education. That'd be cool if you could find something that had that black silhouette for all of these. Then and just have this one. It might be hard, education or degree or something. I don't know, but it would again make your page look more consistent. And it's again just a small thing. This is pretty minimalist, and it is black on white basically, but still these things are so the interiors are black against the white negative space. So this image here looks a little weak compared to the other two, but really cool. I love those black and white images. And the way that you've arranged things is pretty interesting. You've got the main heading, of course, then an image, then web developer and educator, and then kind of like the tagline, as it were, down below. And then you have created 2 columns with work experience and education, with a pretty nice degree of in between, maybe a little too much space in between there. You probably want to spread these out a little bit more and cozy them up. Let's take a look in the browser and see. When you squeeze that in, it probably looks better. I see, yeah. So you have this so that it's squeezing in. So at this point, this is where it looks nice. But when you stretch it out a little bit more, it starts to expand just a little bit too much for desktop. But right about here is where it really looks nice. So that's terrific. I love the blue background too. Very nice. Might have just a little bit of a problem with the contrast, though. If you sent this to the contrast application on the web, you might not make it between the white text here and the blue background. Might be a close run thing, but I don't know. You might, if you were going to go live with this, you might be forced, if you wanted to follow the federal guidelines, to make this blue a little bit darker. But generally speaking, it's cool. I like the white type. It's just might be a little bit hard to read for some people. And then this blue also is a little bit edging towards the background. So I don't know. Contrast is a touchy issue, but really looks terrific. And you've done a good job of using the different colors to highlight the different levels of organization on your headings like that. And then, giving it another look on the unordered lists here on the left-hand side. Now, the bottom here, that blue doesn't quite fit. It seems a little bit jarring down here. So that's the only thing that, and this border and everything. I think this would just look a lot nicer if you just maybe had a little divider here, a little simple top border divider, and then just, a simple footer. This just seems like it's a part of a different website. That doesn't seem to me to quite fit in terms of the style. So, it's okay. It's fine. It gets the job done, and it stands out, but it just stands out a little bit too much, I think. But yeah, terrific look on the main part of the page. And so you've got the meta tag there for the viewport in case you want to go responsive, and title, style, body. Looks good. The wrapper max width 1200 pixels. Looks good. Background color using RGBA. Get the main going one way and the aside going the other. See, here's what I mean. You got 400 and 450, so that's 850 out of 1200. Right? So that's a huge amount of space left over. I'm normally saving like 50 pixels, maybe 100 pixels, and you're saving like 350. So That's why you've got that wide space in the center when the browser window is opened to the full extent. And here you get the clear, that's good. Background color, it's the one that I think it's a little bit too heavy. Although that doesn't seem like it is. Border. This doesn't look like it's as dark as what it looks like on the screen. Yeah. So, yeah, this looks really nice. And, you don't have to do too much with it, You haven't added that many. You've got font colors here. This is not what you want to do. This is like an inline. You don't want that font. That's, I don't know where you got that, but that's not what we want to do. We just want H3. That font isn't going to get you anywhere. I don't know who told you to use font, but that's not a good idea. So get rid of those things. If you want to set font color, then, just create a rule. Create a rule for your H3 and create a rule for it. But that's not the way to do it. Go up into your HTML. This is, what you're doing here is adding sort of an obsolete inline styling, and it is not the way to do it. So, it's very simple to do, and I'm sure you know how to do it. You just go up and, along with your other things, and just, write a rule for H3, and just go color, and, put in whatever color you want. I don't know exactly what that is. That blue color right here, and bingo. That's the way to do that. So don't use those inline styles. That's not good. Otherwise, side, and you've got those fonts everywhere. Okay, footer, center. You don't want center either, because again, remember the dictum that HTML is for structure, not for presentation. So anytime that you have the urge to do something that's going to change the look of the page and make it look differently, that's what presentation means, then don't do it. Stifle yourself. Do not do that. Don't add center, don't add fonts. Do that in the cascading style sheets. Cascading style sheets are where all that stuff belongs. That is the whole rationale and raison d'etre, as the French would say, the reason for existence of CSS is to create the presentational values, the color and the formatting and the alignment and the spacing. All that belongs up here. So don't do that down in your HTML. Okay, but otherwise, really nice. Most of your rules are really good. It's just that, those inline things are not good. But, generally speaking, very nice, very nice. All right, and we got Alicia. Ooh, look at Alicia. She's got a nice, cheery little picture of Christina. Yeah, that's pretty cool looking. And that might have been me. I don't know, because like I said, a couple of these I just had trouble. I had to evolve these things. And it might have been me weaving that extra bracket there, I think is what that is. Special cure. characters. Let's see. So, yeah, so that's, just get rid of that. Where did that come from? And then, again, style here probably is not what you want. Oh, I see. Oh, yeah, so that actually is, yeah, so you don't really want that there. The alt is already here, resume photo, and you don't have to, an alt can have regular words in it. So it's not like you have to worry about, uh, uh, not having a space because of the way that it's being parsed by the server. The class you have to worry. So circle photo, definitely it's got to be one word. But the alt is actually the alternative text. So this is, just regular English. So you can put a space there. But you don't want style. And you already have the alt. So maybe we just get rid of that and put that last bracket there as the opening bracket for the image. And then that red 74 goes away. All right, so that's better. When we look at this here, you can see that disappears, that bracket there. Let's look at this in browser. Yeah. Yeah, this is not meant to be responsive, so you're not responsible for how things shrink down. But I think somehow you've got a little your page is just a little bit too wide. It's starting to squeeze down even at a really large width, which leads me to think that the specifications for your page are probably a little too much. Oh, goodness, yeah. The header you've got at 3,800 pixels wide. No, we don't want that. The header probably doesn't need to have a width because the width of the header is just going to depend upon let's see. Of course, you've got a div with a div of header. And you've got a header. I don't think you really need this because you have a header. And a header and a div tag are really the same kind of element. They're both container elements, right? So unless you're doing something kind of strange with the, by that I mean, sort of sophisticated, with the ID header and the header, I'm not sure that you really need that. You've got a rule for just the header itself as the HTML element. And I don't think you don't really have a rule for the ID. So I would probably get rid of that. The header is there as the container unit, so it's really all you need. And you did that, right? You got the header, you got the H1 in the header, you can have the image inside the H1, perfectly fine. So that's good. And but it's just that the width, what I would do would be I would add, what makes life easier is when you add a wrapper div tag. That's why I always say that I use, a wrapper. And this is the reason, because that way you don't have to worry about setting a stated width to other things. You can just surround everything. I can put the ending right down here, right before the body tag. And then I'll put a little note, end dot wrapper, down at the very bottom of the page, and then I'll make sure that that is an HTML comment so that it doesn't show up. So this div here is right at the very bottom of the page, right before the closing body tag. And it starts way up here, right after the opening body tag. So that means that the wrapper literally is living up to its name. It's wrapping itself around the entire content of your page. So then in your styles, you can use that to, set up the main width of your page so that the page doesn't, expand so much. So this is where I use like that max width, remember, that gives it that sort of accordion ability. And then do something more normal, like 1200 pixels. Then when you do that, you don't need to worry about the header, because the header is inside of the wrapper. And the header then does not need to have any width at all, because the header, being a block level element, one of those container elements, is just by its very nature going to expand as far as it can, which is going to be as far as the wrapper allows it, because it's inside the wrapper. The wrapper has a max width of 1200. So anything inside of your page cannot be more than 1200 pixels. And then in order to center all that content, we want to use that zero auto trick for the margin of your wrapper, right? This makes everything centered in the middle of your browser window. And this margin here, then, again, you don't really need to have that margin. It doesn't quite make sense the way you have it written here anyway. So, and font weight bold, I suppose you could have that. And then line content is not really it's not really a property. You want text align. Center. And then background image not found, okay. Again, it's probably because I downloaded this. Let's say if I change this to just resume assignment. Background image URL. Oh, maybe here is what you want. All this shows up already. I don't understand why. Did I ruin that? Oh no, I'm using the wrong one. Using. Am I? Maybe that's the right one. I'm confusing myself now. Background image. No repeat. Background size. Cover. Heading. See, again, it'd be a good idea to put your rules, as I mentioned, vertically, because it's hard to see otherwise what's happening. And you can put all this together in one rule. You can put the image, the repeat, although cover you really have to do separately. And padding of 100 pixels, I'm not sure you really need that. That's probably one of the reasons why you have kind of the padding is kind of weird. Let's take this out momentarily anyway. See, that really makes things look a little bit more normal. And the margins here in the H1 we might take out too. I took out this font size 95 pixels, by the way. Because when I looked at your page, and I remember now, I opened this up earlier and I looked at your page and you had your body text was 95 pixels, which is like taking up the whole the whole viewport. So I just basically I just eliminated all this and let it default down to the browser default. And I think that actually looks better. And then here you've got P1. Let's see, I wonder why those things are. And this is how I would do the rules here, like this. And then leave that. I don't know why that's red. Let's see. I guess I wiped out this bottom curly bracket here. There you go. All right. Yeah, I don't think we want this. I don't know exactly how you got all these margins. I don't know, you were trying to get this to kind of wrap around the image, I believe, was the thing. But I'm not sure you really need to do that because that's what the, float property is for. But I'm not sure now that I look at this. So body, and again, like I say, it would be easier to look at this if it was set vertically. That's normally how it would be like that. And I like to add, like I said before, space after the center colon between the property and the value, because that also makes things a little bit easier to read. Now, the other problem is that HTML is and CSS is case sensitive. So when you have a capital F here, that's not a good idea. You want to have a small f there. I think I saw somewhere else where you'd done that. We could go up to the edit menu like I mentioned before and down to code and go to apply source formatting. And maybe this would do all that for us. And you can see how that has regularized your rules a little bit. And yeah, the other one is main here. You have to have this set to small m. And I also knocked these rules out because they were still way too big. Font size here of 92% is, that's reasonable because oftentimes want to make the footer text smaller, but I knocked out some of these rules, like 75 pixels for an H2 and 55 for an H3. Just too big, I think. Now we have your let's see what this is here. This area here, that paragraph. What have I done to your page? Let's just take that class out of there. Just make it a regular paragraph. Yeah, see how that just sort of makes things look a little nicer. And then this image might really be a little bit too big. This is a inline image. So, we could probably just, for the time being, make it a little bit smaller. Grab hold of this. Hold down the shift key. We probably don't want to overpower people with her image like it's a billboard. Yeah, that might be a little bit better. So in the design view, you can do that. If you switch to design view, click on an image, and then go down, and I grab that control point at the very bottom right corner, and then push up towards the top left. And then hold down your shift key as you're doing that. And you can make that smaller. So, and then if we look at this, let's take a look real quick here. We're probably taking too long in here, but I want to give you some good feedback. Save that page. So, see, that allows then your work experience and your front-end developer and educator to run naturally below the image. And yet these things are on the right-hand side. And otherwise, the page looks pretty good. I think there's just a little too much space in between each of these. And again, I think you just have to rethink how you're setting up your padding and your margins. I think you're kind of overdoing the size of the fonts. And of course, by my reducing the size of the fonts, maybe that really made the page look wider. So, for example, in main here, I'm not sure that a padding of 50, that means that 50 pixels all the way around. To eliminate this whole thing temporarily here. Let's see what that does. inside the browser. Yeah, that helps a little bit. Moves everything over to the left. And the other thing is that I think you're trying to zero in on the work section with your rule. Remember, this is a class of work. And a class of education down here. And then we have a class of contact info here. So those are the only custom rules, I think. Custom areas, custom attributes that I see. So I'm presuming that when you created this rule here, you were trying to zero in on a work area. I'm sorry, hold on again. Okay, I'm back. Just got a call from the grocery store saying I can pick up my groceries. That's a good thing. All right. To be honest, I forget where we were at. I think we were just talking about the fact that you had created a rule for hash mark number sign work. And actually, if you want that to take effect in the work area, it has to be a class. So remember, the HTML says class equals work. So in your cascading style sheets, you have to use dot instead of hash mark. And as soon as we do that, you can see that that starts to take effect and centers and gives a little bit more padding and whatnot to the work area, which I think is probably what you had planned on doing, Nikki. So, and probably the same true for the education experience. So if we added the same set of rules for education, that would jump over and look the same as the work. So, yeah, a few misconceptions there, but generally speaking, a nice attempt. Just for some reason, got your font sizes and the width of the container way out of joint. But other than that, you still had a nice conception as to what you wanted to do. Right, I think we have one more. This is from Long. And again, Long looks pretty good. Long has a nice image and has broken this up into columns and has a nice color scheme and is breaking up the main headings with the dark background color. You can see here with work experience. Now, this is kind of interesting because he's starting out with the introductory area as a column on the left-hand side, which is an interesting way of doing it. And then the actual resume information itself, work experience and education, running down the right-hand side in what would be the main column area, at least the main content, and then having a footer running all the way across both columns, picking up the same background color as the main headings and the background for the left-hand column. So again, pretty nice, almost ingenious way of setting up the page. A little bit different, I think, than you would normally think. Let's take a look at the code. and see how long I managed to do that. Again, he's got the initial content there. I may have included that, I'm not sure. But this is what helps you create the responsive design. And Cloudflare, I'm not sure, was that included? Everyone seems to be using Font Awesome. Maybe I included that in the original file. Now I can't remember. If not, you guys are all on the same wavelength, trying to pick up on Font Awesome icons. All right, so we have a head, meta, title, and then style. It's good. Body, max width, 1000 pixels, a little bit less wide, but perfectly fine. Margin 0 auto, line height 1.3, it's okay. Header with a particular background color and the color of the text to contrast. Float left using a % of 25. Main floating right with a % of 68.6. That leaves, what about 6.4% or something like that as the space in between, which is, fine. The header has padding all the way around of 2 M's, which gives it a little bit more negative space on the inside, which is good. Main background color gray with the color white. Footer, got to clear the footer because you've got floated elements up above, so as long as it's got the clear, it's picking up background color, color of the text, the same as the original side color, or left-hand color. The header image is setting to 100% width. That makes it flexible, which we're not worried about here. The A tag in the header is getting a certain color too. The H2 inside the sections of the main is setting that dark background color too, and then adding some padding so that the background color does not ride right up against the text itself. So you can see here on work experience, and then further down the page on education, there's a little bit of extra negative space around the headings, which gives the headings a little bit of area to breathe, which is always good. And we've got a group rule here. The paragraphs inside the main plus the H4 plus the unordered list are all given padding left and padding right, 35 and 20. Now remember, you could do that all in one rule. We could set padding and then go 0, 20, 0, 35, and it would end up being the same. But this, when you're starting out, that's fine to do it that way. It lets you know exactly what you're doing and which direction it's going. Social icons, setting a pretty small font size there. Padding, text decoration, non-text align center, a little bit of margin. Hover, changing the opacity. Does that work down below? You have icons, yeah. You can see that does work, changes the opacity. So those icons, maybe those icons and everything were included in the original file, since everyone seems to be picking up on that. I'm sorry, I can't remember what was included in the original file. But anyway, that's cool. And a rollover, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram. Didn't use all of these, but we have rules formed just in case you wanted to add them. It's not a bad idea. Here we've got a different colored number, which is not, if it's red, it means it's an outright mistake. If it's a gold color, it means it's just sort of a warning. And the warning here is that an alt attribute must be present. So the profile here really should have an alt. Don't necessarily have to have height and width if you want it to be flexible. And you don't really have to have anything inside the alt double quotes if you don't want to. If it's purely for stylistic purposes, and in this case, you know, I mean, you may put your own picture in there if it were your own real resume. So you want to say, you know, my image, like that. And then if you save that, you can see that that goal by 119 disappears. But even if you did not put anything in there, it would still be okay. Just the fact of having the alt equals with double quotes. You don't necessarily have to put anything in there if the image is purely for stylistic reasons. If it doesn't have any content purpose, if it's just there to make your page look prettier, and sometimes images are not a part of the content, they're just there to make things look pretty, then you can have an image with no alternative text, but you still have to have the actual attribute. So you can have nothing in there, or you could put an empty space in there. If we save that again, you can see that this does not pop up again. Jeremy was perfectly happy to have no text there, just the existence of the attribute itself. So, yeah, otherwise that looks good. A very nice, interesting design. Well done. Just a couple little, you know, questions here or there. I think that is all that I have right now. There's a couple other people that were going to send me some stuff, but I haven't received them yet. All right, I know this has gone on long enough, but I hope that I've given you some feedback on your individual work. It's not a bad idea to listen to and look at everybody's work, because if we were in the classroom, that's what would happen. And oftentimes, I know, at least when I am taking a class, which I'm doing a lot, even at my advanced age, I'm always taking classes of some sort. I oftentimes learn as much or more about the work that my classmates are doing. So I try to pay close attention to what they're up to. So hopefully you've gotten something out of this. Now remember that we have another homework. Oh no, another homework due on Monday, but that's pretty easy. Remember that. Let's see if we go back. Do we have the logjam? Yeah. If we go back to the logjam, the next assignment is columns and navigation. And actually, I can download this for you, and we can take a quick look at it. So here it says that we want to create a page that uses columns and has 3 different sets of navigational links. So the thing is, you can create any kind of page you want. It doesn't have to have a lot of content in it. You can put Latin text in it. You can put dummy photos if you want. Whatever you want to do. Create a web page that has all the regular ingredients, though. You want to have regular HTML, you know, header, an aside, a main content area, a footer. So use the regular main HTML stuff, but you can use dummy text and images wherever you want. But the thing is that you should use the float technique that we've been discussing to create at least 2 columns for the middle part of your page. So in other words, like we've been doing with the aside floated one way and the main floated another, by now you guys know how to do that. You just have to be sure to give it a specific width and be sure to clear both on the element that's right below in the HTML code, just below the last floated element, which oftentimes is the footer. Then I want you to create a set of main navigational links that run down vertically in your sidebar. So this is a little different. Most of the time we've just been doing main nav that's running horizontally across the entire page. But now I want you to put navigation links running vertically in the sidebar, which means that you don't use the display inline block. You just, you don't have to worry because the list items themselves are by default vertical. And create a rule also for, hover, when you roll over. And be sure to put all groups of links into an HTML list, of course, like we normally do. Then we do want to create the normal set of links running across the upper part of the page beneath the masthead. You'll probably want to put these in a nav element. You might want to put the navigational links in the sidebar in a nav element. I think I've told you in the past that you usually only want to use one nav element on your page unless it's fairly complicated. But in this case, I'm assuming that you've got more than just a couple links running down vertically in the aside and the normal set of main links running horizontally across the top. So you could, if you wanted to, put both sets of links in a nav element, but in any case you'd probably want to keep them inside of an HTML list. And of course, for the horizontal ones, I suggest using display property in block. I know some of you have used the float property for doing that, but using display inline block I think is better because you don't have to worry about the elements below having to be cleared. Then the kicker is that you want to add a third set of links in your footer. And for here you just put maybe just a couple. Oftentimes you'll see, even in a simple footer, that they'll have a couple links for, sitemap or employment opportunities or something like that. Down here, you don't have to use a nav element, and to be honest, I oftentimes don't even use an HTML list in the footer if I only have, 2 or 3 really secondary simple links. If you have a fat footer with a whole bunch of links set into different sections, then of course you would want to use HTML lists for that. But for just a couple incidental links in the footer, I wouldn't go to the trouble of using a list for that. And the idea is to make each set of links look a little bit differently, which means that not only do you have to add these to the HTML, but then I want the links in the sidebar to look different than the links that run across the page. And both of those should look different than the links that are in the footer. And the way to do that, of course, is to use descendant selectors for each set. So pretty easy. If you have one set in a nav area, you can use nav A as the basis for your rules. If you put another set of links into an aside, you could use aside space A as the basis for your rules. And for the ones that are in the footer, you could go footer space A for those kinds of rules. And pretty easy to do, but it's important that you understand how the descendant selectors work and how you can use them in a practical example like this. So that's the point of the exercise. So it really isn't too hard, and it shouldn't take you too long. And again, you don't have to make any kind of an elaborate page. Just be sure that you have some of the main skeletal elements that you fill in with some dummy text, and you could throw in an image or two. And then, as usual, send those to me due on Monday evening to john@prairiestudio.com. Okie dokie. I hope, as usual, that you guys are all safe and sound, and I will talk to you.